Good morning. Hi, welcome. So today's panel, we are talking about safe investing. The first question I would like to ask, before that, please feel free to ask questions through our app, and we'll take Q&A in the last 5 minutes or so. The first thing I want to ask is the big elephant in the room, SoftBank, the 100 billion vision fund. Surely, Masa-san's 100 billion has made it a little bit difficult for traditional venture capital investors, right? He has 100 billion. It's like 100 VC funds. How do you feel about SoftBank? Yixun, you want to take this first?
Oh, I take it first? Okay. Well, I think to me, it's not a bad thing. The reality is that there is a lot of liquidity. There's a lot of capital flooding the market. Generally, at a private level, technology-driven innovation is taking center stage again over the last couple of years. And so this $100 billion fund will be placed in multiple bets like Didi and invested in Grab. We invested in Grab earlier. So from our perspective, we are kind of passing that baton in terms of capital needs to Masa and his team. So I think that's the good side, that's the bad side. So if you are, your portfolio get financing from them, it's always that giving them that more ammunition to grow. The flip side, though, is it's very dilutive. They come in with $1 billion, or $2 billion, it dilutes the hell out of us. And so there is a pros and cons effect. It does also provide liquidity to venture capital early stage. So if there's also opportunity for us to get liquidity if we choose to at the later stage and point in time. So I would say it's a balanced thing. It really depends on which side you look at it.
I think Jixun said it all. Yeah, I think it's on the whole, I would see it as, because Qiming basically plays more on the Series A and Series B side, Series A and Series B rounds. So, SoftBank coming in at later stage rounds, at much higher valuations is a good thing for some of our portfolio companies. So we welcome that. Of course, valuations at the later stage rounds would go up, sometimes dramatically. But I think, it's a good thing that people are more interested in tech than in some of the more traditional slow growth industries. So I think it's good that money is flowing in the right sectors. Yeah.
I would just echo what Jixun said, which is the ample liquidity in the market. And I think that's just one very concentrated pool of capital. But in addition to that, I think where SoftBank's influence, particularly on us as a strategic, is certainly as it relates to the camp that they built around their ecosystem. And there's a certain alliance, which we may be sometimes conflicted. So that's certainly an impact for us as a strategic.
Yeah. So for them, like SoftBank is great because that's their exit option. But for you, as a strategic investor, SoftBank in a way is a competitor, right? So how do you make sure, as since JD has been very acquisitive, that you get a good value out of what you are investing in, Winston?
So we're very focused in the areas that we believe we're strong in. So we're focused on e-commerce, internet finance, and logistics. All three areas touch a lot of data points, but it's all wrapped around with technology. And so we're really investing in these three core business areas and then a lot into technology. In fact, we've made the announcement that the next 12 years of our focus, so we're about starting our year 14 right now. So we're a young company. We're about 60 billion in market cap today in less than 13 years of being founded. But, in terms of our focus for the next 12-year cycle is really around technology. Everything as we now gain scale as the largest retailer inside China and actually the third largest internet company globally by revenues, almost $60 billion a year in revenues. So from that perspective, we want to be able to share our scale and what we built with our partners.
China has created 35 unicorns since 2017. So I imagine with the startups, the low-hanging fruits are gone. What are the areas where you still see growth that still have value?
Please please go ahead.
Well, I think that it is very actually interesting the fact that so many unicorns are coming out of China. I think it shows that China is at the very leading edge of innovation now. I mean, maybe the only place that can compare is the U.S. But compared to when I started in the industry, or I came to China in 2005 from the Silicon Valley. I think that just shows that Chinese companies have come a long way. Some of the companies that we've invested in, like Mobike, for example, is a leader in the bike sharing. It's a pioneer in bike sharing, the dockless, stationless bike sharing. So I think that's a really good sign. I think that in terms of that kind of innovation is just starting, I would say. And China has a lot that they can bring to the rest of the world. So we're actually seeing more and more Chinese entrepreneurs going overseas, taking Chinese innovative models. So that, I think, we're just at the beginning. And then I think in terms of the Chinese mobile internet market, it has matured in terms of the number of users, but in terms of the monetization, in terms of the usage, that still continues to grow. So we're still looking at newer models that young people like. We very much have been spending some time on the 2000 people born in the 00 generation because they're, very interesting generation. They're just starting to go to college now. They're actually born in the mobile internet era. They grow up using the mobile internet. They're only children, so they're very lonely. we have a company called 同桌游戏, TZ Games, where they socialize by playing little mini games, and they actually find days on this app. That is mainly, getting one-on-one little mini games, through playing games, you start to get to know the other person and start chatting. So I think that is a very interesting trend that we're also seeing. And another growth area we see is in the new retail space, because as you know, most of the growth has been online, but we also see that there's opportunities offline, or combining the two. How do you use the data that you have online to develop stores offline? How do you make offline stores more intelligent? For example, we invested in Bingo Box, which is unmanned convenience store chain in China, and it uses the WeChat to identify the user, and then you use the mobile payment to pay, and there is no need for you to have a person in the store at all. So that is also an area of innovation that we think is very interesting.
Yeah, so I would just add to what Helen has just said about how the innovation in China has shifted. When I first started in China in 2000, and over the first 10 years, I would say there's a lot of ideas, and we say copy to China, whether it's from US or from somewhere else. But in the last, I would say 5-7 years, we are seeing ideas copying from China, and copying from China into not just Southeast Asia, but also into US, right? So US, the bike sharing service actually started out of China, and now you have Lime Bike, you have Bird, and you have other things. Obviously, it goes from mechanical to e-bikes and e-powered scooters, etc. So the innovation cycle is changing in China, where China is now thinking ahead. What are some of the experience that the consumer wants? That's one. I think the consumers are getting more sophisticated. If you look at the whole payment infrastructure in China, it's getting more and more sophisticated. I mean, I literally don't carry too much cash in China now. And sometimes I do forget carrying cash when I come to Hong Kong and even back to Singapore. So that whole experiential change that's happening in China is driving new ideas. And the other thing I think that's happening is that given the landscape, there's no lack of capital, given the competition. So the game has to be up. So I think there's a lot more technology that needs to be applied into what you do. Data science, AI. So I think these are areas where we'll continue to fund innovation that has a little bit more edge, entry to barrier, if you will. So that's something, and I think that will be more unicorns. The market is big enough. The enterprise sector is a growing sector in China. There are more companies building robots and machines that are intelligent, from drones to cars. So the market is big enough to create these unicorns. And I think a lot of these ideas over time will get filtered out to not just within China, but in Southeast Asia and other regions.
Please.
Yeah, I would just add, and I can agree with you more, Jixun, in terms of the trends, in terms of China being at the forefront now in terms of leading certain business models or usage adoption of internet or mobile internet. One of the most poignant points that I attend a lot of these conferences. One of the ones recently is a panel where we actually judge companies from that region, and I won't particularly say the region, but the winner was a payment company, and I have actually voted for that list, and I would not have voted for mobile payment. But for them, in that region, mobile payment was so new. And for here, it's like we use it every day. And why I say this is, all this innovation and business model is really enabled because of the prevalence of mobile payment, because that's solved, and I think that enables a lot of business models. If you think about, your successful investments in, bike sharing, for example, that without the payment, that would not be possible. Absolutely. So I think that really enables a lot of things. The other thing is the theme around data and around the use of data. You talked about the offline transactions, trying to get more data into the stores, because today, as we're an e-commerce company, when people come and browse who's coming onto our site, what are they searching for, and what are they then comparing? We know all of that. But the stores don't know that. People walk into the store, people don't know who that person that walked into the store is. They compare different things. The salesperson is not recording all of this. So all of that is valuable data that actually could be adapted. And there's 80% of transactions today that's still happening in the retail space in China that's offline. So there's a lot more that we need to capture.
I'm going to take a question from the audience. Sequoia just raised a fund to compete with SoftBank. Do you think startups prefer a traditional VC model or someone like SoftBank? And I have an additional question for our VC investors here. When you're investing startups, do you have goals, revenue profitability goals, or you're pretty much hands up? And Winston, for you, you're a strategic investor. So what's the take? What do startups prefer?
You want to start, or?
Anyone jumping?
For us, we are very thesis-driven in our investment, and obviously there are big funds. I think the questions around Sequoia versus SoftBank, the Sequoia growth fund that they just raised, I think it was $6 or $7 billion. Hillhouse raised, $10 billion. So that they will be writing big checks. For us, we are still playing Series A, Series B, Series C. So it's not a choice. I think from our perspective, the choice is still among our peers, and then who do they choose to work with. And we are very thesis-driven. To answer the question that Shuli just asked, for example, we invest in the whole transportation network. So we're invested in Didi, we're invested in Grab, we're invested in Hello Bike. We also invest in the cars. So we are invested in XPeng, which is a smart car company. We invest in technologies around autonomous drive and smart drives. So we invest in a company called Drive AI in the US. We invest in a company called XCharge, which builds this smart charging stations for cars. So it's an ecosystem that we try to invest in, and typically very early in the cycle. And if you look at how SoftBank invests as well, they are also somewhat thesis-driven, right? They are in Didi, they are in Grab, they are in Uber, and therefore they can, mastermind some of these magic around some of these consolidation. But at the end of the day, investors, in my view, Masa himself is very thesis-driven. They also led the investment in this Food Truck Alliance most recently. Again, it's centered around this Uber sharing, ride sharing platforms that they can build. And along that, there will be other services that can come out of it. So I think different VCs or different investors will pick different theses to go after. And those will be some differentiation.
When you invest in a startup, do you actually have Masa-san on the back of your mind, thinking, oh, maybe that's something he's going to be interested in?
Not at all. If I think that way, I don't think I can. I think at the end of the day, it's just what makes sense, and then so kind of projecting the future. And obviously, a very important thing is the entrepreneurs, the team that kind of runs the company. You asked the question around, do we care about numbers, profit? It's not all the time. Like Drive is not about operating metric or revenue or data. It's about their technology and how well they have run in their system. So we measure them against their peers, if you will. And certain companies, we look at operating data and not necessarily financials. And some companies, we look purely at financials. So it really depends on the business.
So Winston, there's an audience question for you. JD spent a lot of money into artificial intelligence. Do you expect the return? What do you expect the returns to be in the short term?
I was hoping to answer the other question.
Okay, that one
no,
first.
I'm kidding. But for us, I think AI is really a long-term game. And I know there's a blockchain questions coming up, but I would say our areas of focus, what we call ABCD, which is AI, big data, blockchain, cloud, and devices, which we group that into devices and also IoT. These are kind of our really focus areas in terms of technology investment. I do think today AI is going to be, it's at early stages, similar to blockchain. Maybe AI is slightly early, but certainly there's a lot of data that's already on our platform that we could use the AI technology. So it makes a lot of sense for AI, pure AI companies. And we see that across the board. I've seen robotic companies that we were talking about it, robotics company who try to create cool robots, but without really knowing what the problem they're solving for. And then when we look at it, we're actually, as senior management, we're told to go and help out in our logistics center after every major sales event to just see what the other 90,000 employees who are delivering, in the heat of Beijing really feel like. And so you know what the process is. So that when I go out and look at investments, I know exactly which step that robotic arm or whatever it is trying to solve. So it makes a lot of sense. But you see a lot of things, people are creating very cool things, but without knowing where the application might be. We actually have the data and we have the operations. So, we can really align well with the pure startups in AI and other areas to really integrate and take what they're trying to develop into practice. Yeah.
Now we have a blockchain question. Top VCs now create dedicated funds for cryptocurrency and blockchain. What are your thoughts on this? Is this just the beginning? And last time I checked, Bitcoin was in the bear market. Is this a good idea at all to cipher up, to basically spin off some of your talents in the whole VC fund to dedicate on blockchain entirely?
Well, I don't think Qiming has a dedicated fund right now. I think we're interested in blockchain, though. I think the technology is interesting. There's a way of creating smart contracts. So, but it seems like it's very early stage of the technology infrastructure, development. So I think that probably more on the technology side, there will be some interesting investments that come up, and then later on the application side. So that's really my thoughts on blockchain right now. And then I think for VCs also, I think another way that we are interested is obviously if some of our companies can do an ICO. Especially if these companies are not in China or their main market is not in China, because it can help encourage user adoption of their services. So I think that is an interesting area for some of our portfolio companies to consider.
And Winston, you guys have a dedicated task force just for blockchain development, right? Or no?
Yes, so we have a dedicated department that's specifically focused on blockchain. It's very important as we, particularly in terms of tracking, our platform and how we're founded is really around the customer experience and authenticity of product. So to have blockchain to be able to further enhance that, it's very important for us in terms of, particularly in the area of fresh foods and other supply chain. It's been an issue in China, and we want to continue to solve that with our partners.
The last question is Xiaomi's IPO. The Xiaomi's IPO is coming across a little bit more disappointing than the original ambition. What does this translate into fundraising moving forward? Do startups start to feel the liquidity crunch because of the Xiaomi IPO?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, Xiaomi is one of Qiming star companies in our portfolio. So, actually, we're very proud of Xiaomi and what is achieved with its IPO. I think it's like there's only 2 other companies with 50 billion market cap, right, that's gone public. So, I think that, you know, just because of the discounted valuation is not a reason to say, you know, to talk about the market. I think in general, it's a great company, great, you know, what is achieved so far. I think on the other hand, you know, I think that might be some jitters in the capital markets. I think some of it tied to the macro environment as well.
Right.
So I would say that, you know, markets go through cycles, right? Capital markets go through cycles. And, you know, it's just that for good companies, they should be able to get through those cycles and, you know, do well. So, I mean, like, in my career at VC, I mean, you know, we've seen so many companies, you know, go through the very distressing capital markets. So, I mean, I think Amazon, you know, is one example, and have done really well afterwards. So, for VCs, we're not so concerned about the short-term capital markets.
But, I think I just ended. Thank you so much for coming.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.